Ever find yourself trying to, piece together a major event, something huge, and suddenly you're just wading through all these weird theories online?
Yeah, it happens all the time. And that's exactly where we're headed today.
We're doing a deep dive into something pretty heavy. The anti-Semitic conspiracy theories that popped up after the 9/11 attacks.
And we're grounding this in some solid research, specifically a report from the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, back in 2003.
Right. It's called Unraveling Anti-Semitic 9/11 Conspiracy Theories. The authors were Glenn A. Tobias and Abraham H. Foxman.
And it really meticulously documented this disturbing trend of blaming Jewish people in Israel for 9/11.
So our goal here, our mission for this deep dive, is to really unpack that. We want to understand the core arguments, who was pushing these ideas and, well, why they seem to catch on.
Yeah, and the report points out some really unsettling connections, like alliances between groups you'd never expect to see agreeing on anything. It's quite disturbing, actually.
Definitely. The ADL report basically found this global network pushing the idea that Jews in Israel were behind 9/11.
And what's striking, as the report notes, is that this wasn't exactly new. It felt like a modern twist on really old, dangerous anti-Semitic ideas.
Like the protocols of the Elders of Zion.
Exactly like that. That forgery, claiming a Jewish plan for world domination, has been debunked countless times. But the core idea, the secret Jewish cabal controlling events, just keeps getting recycled. These 9/11 theories were basically updating that trope for the 21st century.
Okay, so let's get into the anti-Semitic foundation here. What are the basic ideas these theories lean on?
Well, at the very heart of it is this ancient, totally baseless idea that Jewish people are secretly plotting, manipulating world events, for their own gain, this supposed hidden master plan.
Right.
And when you apply that to 9/11, it becomes this claim that, well, only Israeli agents painted as uniquely evil and cunning could possibly have pulled off something so complex and devastating.
So it's feeding right into that stereotype of the super powerful, manipulative Jew, just using 9/11 as the context.
Precisely. Now, you mentioned these unlikely alliances the report found. Who exactly are we talking about here? This sounds wild.
It is wild and deeply disturbing. The report details this convergence between American far-right extremists, white supremacists, neo-Nazis.
Groups like the National Alliance, Creativity Movement, Aryan Nations, that sort of thing.
Yeah, those groups, and believe it or not, elements within the Arab and Muslim world, they all seem to find common ground online, pushing these same anti-Semitic 9/11 narratives.
Wow. So the internet became this melting pot for hate, this cross-fertilization the report mentioned.
Exactly. That's the term they use. The anonymity, the global reach. It just let these completely different groups connect and amplify these awful theories like never before.
Okay, so let's dig into the specific theories the report identified. It breaks them down, right? The first category seems to be the ones claiming Israelis or Jews actually planned the attacks.
Yeah, and the big one there is blaming the Mossad.
Right. Israel's an intelligence agency. They get cast as the mastermind. It's like their actual reputation for being, well, effective gets twisted.
How so?
Conspiracy theorists basically argue, look how sophisticated this attack was. Only the morass has that kind of capability, that kind of ruthlessness. It's this perverse logic.
So it's almost like a backhanded compliment, but used to paint them as uniquely evil.
Exactly. This idea that only Jewish people could be that cunning and wicked, and the supposed motive.
What did the theories claim that was?
It always comes back to that core idea of Jewish manipulation. The report mentions a Saudi newspaper editorial, Okaz, I think. He claimed the goal was to undermine ties between Arabs and Muslims and basically pit the Muslim and Christian worlds against each other.
Ah, the old divide and conquer strategy, but with an anti-Semitic spin.
You got it. Always aiming for some imagined benefit for Israel or Jewish people through global chaos.
Okay, moving on. The next one sounds really strange. The Israeli art student spy ring, what was that about?
Oh, this one got a lot of play. Across the board, far-right sites, Arab media, even some mainstream news outlets initially picked up on bits of it.
Seriously, what was the actual claim?
The story was that these young Israelis, pretending to be art students selling paintings door to door, were actually Mossad agents.
Okay.
And that they were tracking the 9/11 hijackers, but, crucially, didn't warn U.S. authorities. Deliberately let it happen.
Wow. So that combines the stereotype of Jewish cleverness with this idea of pure malice. Not just spying, but letting thousands die.
Exactly. It implies Israel valued some secret operation more than preventing the attack, playing into that awful trope about Jews supposedly disregarding non-Jewish lives.
Where did this even come from? The report mentions
Yeah,
sources.
it points to an initial Fox News report by Carl Cameron. That seemed to give it some early oxygen. He talked about over 100 Israelis detained, posing as art students, and hinted they might have known something. Then there was a report in Intelligence Online, a French publication, and even something from the DEA warning about suspicious Israeli students maybe having military intel backgrounds.
And this stuff actually made it into more mainstream places, too.
For a time, yeah. The report mentions AP, Le Monde, but then, of course, the official denials came.
The FBI, Israeli officials.
Both. They clarified, yes, some young Israelis were deported for working illegally, visa stuff, but zero evidence of any spy ring connected to 9/11, absolutely none.
But for the conspiracy theorists, that denial just becomes part of the cover-up right now.
You know it. Any conflicting information, any nuance, like maybe they were tracking someone else entirely, or maybe it was just visa violations, it all got twisted to fit the narrative. Jews are guilty.
It's like confirmation bias on overdrive. Okay, next up. Israeli companies spying. How did this one work?
This sort of built on the art student idea. It claimed that Israeli tech companies, ones with access to like U.S. phone systems or airport security,
Right.
were part of this big spying operation linked to 9/11. Names like Converse Infosys, Amdocs, ICTS kept popping up.
I feel like I remember hearing whispers about this. The report mentions Christopher Bullen at American Free Press, and someone named Ingrid Rimland talking about ICTS, the airport security firm.
That's right. The basic idea was these companies have Israeli ties, therefore they must have provided a backdoor for Mossad to spy on U.S. agencies, maybe even track the hijackers or, somehow help them.
So technology becomes the weapon in this version of the conspiracy.
Pretty much. It taps into that same fear of secret Jewish control, just using tech companies as the vehicle for betraying the U.S. The ADL report connects it back to that Cameron report, too, the one mentioning Amdocs possibly monitoring calls.
It all seems to loop back. And then there's the one about the Jewish ownership of the World Trade Center. This feels like it hits some really old, ugly stereotypes.
It really does. This focused on Larry Silverstein and Frank Lowy, who were, yes, Jewish businessmen. Silverstein had just leased the WTC complex, Lowy the shopping area.
And the claim was?
Pure anti-Semitic trope territory. The claim was they somehow engineered the whole thing to collect huge insurance payouts. The greedy Jew stereotype, plain and simple.
It's just disgusting. The report mentions outlets like Gospel News Alert and American Free Press pushing this.
Yeah, they were key promoters. It's just appalling. It completely ignores the immense human tragedy, the thousands killed, and instead spins this vile story based entirely on the owner's religion.
Okay, so those were theories claiming Jews or Israel planned it. The report then looks at corroborating theories, stuff supposedly proving they knew beforehand. The first is that myth about 4,000 Israelis told to stay home. That one seemed everywhere for a while.
It really did. And
Yeah.
it's just complete fiction. The story went that 4,000 Israelis working at the WTC got a secret heads up from Israeli intelligence Mossad, usually telling them not to come to work on September 11th.
And the proof was supposedly that no Israelis died.
Right, which was also completely false. Israelis did die in the attacks, but the lie itself was incredibly persistent.
Where did that lie even start? The report tracks it.
It traces the origin back to Al-Manar, the Hezbollah TV station in Lebanon. From there, it just exploded online and got picked up by all sorts of publications across the Arab world, but also by white supremacist groups here in the U.S.
It's incredible how fast that stuff spreads and how these different hate groups latch on to the same misinformation.
It really is. The report mentions how David Duke's followers amplified it, even twisting a totally unrelated Jerusalem Post Article 1 about Israelis worried about missing relatives, twisting that into proof of a warning.
Unbelievable.
And it even bled into slightly more mainstream places. The report cites Amiri Baraka, the poet, using it in a poem and defending it by saying he found it on the internet.
Just shows how easily fabrications can take root. Okay, the next corroborating one. The 5 Israeli spies found taping. What's the real story versus the conspiracy?
Okay, so the real event. 5 Israeli men were arrested in New Jersey shortly after the towers fell. People saw them filming the burning skyline, and some reports claim they looked like they were celebrating.
Celebrating? That sounds inflammatory.
It does. But the investigation found they were working for a moving company, illegally, without the right visas. They were eventually deported for that.
And the FBI looked into any 9/11 connection.
Thoroughly. The report states clearly, The FBI concluded they had absolutely no connection to the 9/11 plot itself. No advanced knowledge, no involvement, just poor judgment maybe, and definitely illegal employment.
But that wasn't good enough for the conspiracy crowd.
Not even close. Writers like Ballin and Michael Collins Piper at American Free Press kept pushing the spy narrative. They even twisted a later article in The Forward, a Jewish newspaper, which speculated maybe there was some kind of Mossad surveillance happening, but totally unrelated to 9/11.
They used that as proof.
They did. And an ABC 2020 report, while finding no link to the attacks,
Right.
probably added fuel to the fire for some just by discussing the suspicions. It's that pattern again, isn't it?
Yeah, take a real event, strip the context, ignore the official findings, and hammer it into your pre-existing theory of Jewish guilt. The report also touches on the whole conspiracy theory industry. What does that look like?
Well, the ADL points out that a whole cottage industry grew up around 9/11 conspiracies in general, and the anti-Semitic ones were definitely part of that. We're talking books, pamphlets, videos, websites, speakers.
Generating content, basically.
Right, selling materials, getting donations, holding events. The report mentions things like a book by the Creativity Movement specifically blaming Jews, or the constant drumbeat from American Free Press about Israeli spies.
And it feeds on.
Fear, mistrust, existing prejudices. It offers simple answers blaming a scapegoat for incredibly complex and traumatic events. It gives people a sense of understanding, however warped.
The report mentions Thierry Meyssan's book, too, right? That one was more broadly anti-government, less specifically anti-Semitic, but part of the same milieu.
Exactly. It shows how the broader conspiracy landscape can create fertile ground for these more targeted, hateful theories to grow as well.
Okay, so bringing it towards the end, the report looks at the future impact. What were the ADL's main worries back in 2003?
Their biggest concern was that these theories wouldn't just fade away, that they'd become a lasting, a persistent new strain of anti-Semitism, something people could pull out for years to demonize Jews and Israel.
And the potential for violence?
That was a major worry, too, that these lies could incite real-world attacks. Plus, the report stressed how dangerous it was that these different hate groups, far-right extremists, elements in the Arab Muslim world, were finding common cause through these narratives.
And it noted these ideas were maybe getting more traction in some parts of the world than in the U.S. mainstream.
Yeah, particularly in parts of the Arab and Muslim world at that time. It painted a pretty grim picture of how tragedy could be poisoned, twisted to fuel age-old hatreds.
So the bottom line from the ADL was the need to expose these lies.
Absolutely. Understanding how they work, where they came from, is step one in fighting back against them.
So wrapping this up, the main takeaway is pretty stark. Seeing how the shock and trauma of 9/11 were just ruthlessly exploited to push these incredibly damaging anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, falsely blaming Jews and Israel for something horrific.
Yeah, and it really makes you, the listener, think, doesn't it? How do completely baseless stories like this gain so much traction? What is it in society that allows them to spread?
And what does that mean for how we understand other big, complex events today, or the divisions we see all around us?
Because we see it constantly, right? Misinformation spreading like wildfire, especially online. Looking back at how these 9/11 theories operated gives us clues for dealing with the garbage we see now.
Definitely makes you pause and think more critically about where information comes from and maybe why someone is telling a particular story.
For sure.
If you want to dig deeper into this, you could check out the ADL's website. They do a lot of ongoing work tracking hate speech and misinformation.
Or, as we mentioned, learning about the history of the protocols of the Elders of Zion really helps understand the deep roots of these kinds of conspiracy theories. It's not comforting, but it's illuminating.
Absolutely. Because ultimately, if we want to counter prejudice and lies, we really need to understand where they come from and how they operate.
Couldn't agree more. It demands that informed understanding.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.